Thanks for leaving, Olivia said with a sneer as she glanced at me. I just stared back silently. We're trying to save money on wages. We don't want someone who takes advantage of overtime pay in our company, Jerry added, looking satisfied. A week later, I kept receiving calls from the company. Hello, I answered. The president asked, Who are you? I chuckled at his question. I'm Nicole Wallace. I'm 57 years old and I've worked here for 35 years since I graduated from college. Our company provides administrative support, handles social insurance and taxes for our clients, especially for busy company presidents who focus on sales and lack time for paperwork. I work in the tax department. I earned my bookkeeping and tax accountant qualifications in school, which led me to join this company. Currently, I manage 41 clients, keeping me quite busy. Even though a part-timer helps with accounting entries, it's still a lot to handle. But I can't show any weakness. Our clients are long-term relationships, many of whom have faced tough times. Seeing them persevere motivates me to keep going, so here I am again today, in front of my computer. Lately, I've been having a hard time. Jerry and Olivia have been bothering me a lot. Jerry, who's 6 years younger than me, is now the head of our tax department. He used to be just a regular colleague, but ever since he got promoted 5 months ago, his attitude completely changed. He used to speak politely, but now he's always sarcastic or complaining. Nicole, what are you doing? You got some nerve slacking off during work hours, he'd say, glaring at me while I'm researching tax-saving strategies for our clients. When I tried to argue back, Jerry stayed calm and said, Just check the manual for that. Don't do anything unnecessary, and if you end up working overtime, don't expect to get paid for it. I overheard Olivia, Jerry's assistant, saying, Nicole, you should work more efficiently. At this rate, you'll never finish. She laughed mockingly, adding, That's probably why you're still just a regular employee. I was actually the first one offered the promotion to head the department, but I turned it down. Being the head would mean more time managing and less time working directly with clients. Since it was an internal offer, Jerry and Olivia didn't know about it. I'll make sure to keep up with my regular duties, I managed to say. Despite everything, Jerry and Olivia kept harassing me. You're racking up overtime again. What a waste, Jerry's angry voice echoed today. Nicole, enough already. Your constant overtime is dragging down the whole tax department's performance, Olivia sighed. The reason for yesterday's overtime was simple. Jerry had let a month's worth of declaration forms pile up, all due by the end of the month. After work yesterday, he abruptly dumped several client files on my desk. My heart sank when I saw them. Wait, aren't these all due this month? I asked in confusion, but Jerry was already packing up. I'm leaving. Take care of these, he said briskly and hurried out of the office. Good luck, Olivia added, following Jerry with a mocking laugh. Unbelievable, I sighed as I opened the client files left on my desk. Some of them were supposed to be Olivia's responsibility. I sighed even deeper. I understood why Jerry was harassing me. They wanted me to retire quickly. I have more experience and deeper knowledge in taxation than him, so other members of the tax department often come to me with their questions instead of Jerry. There are other reasons why everyone avoids Jerry. He looks oily and unfriendly. The only female employee who stays close to him is Olivia. Jerry has a preference for younger women. That's probably why he wants me to retire, so the other female employees will rely on him more. It's such shallow thinking, it makes me uneasy. Also, he simply doesn't like me. Olivia was harassing me to gain favor with Jerry. Since Jerry evaluates the tax department's performance, she probably aimed to undermine me to get a good evaluation from him. Anyway, I have to handle these declarations. I need to prepare tax forms for my assigned companies, but it seems like I won't finish today's work either. If I try to claim overtime, I'll just get complaints from Jerry and Olivia, so I resigned myself to working unpaid overtime. One day I was suddenly summoned to the president's office. Our company had recently undergone a change in leadership. The founder's father, who had been running the company, had fallen ill, and his son, who previously worked elsewhere, took over despite being unfamiliar with our operations. Excuse me, I said as I entered the president's office. I noticed Jerry and Olivia there, both wearing unpleasant smirks. Why are Jerry and the others here? I muttered quietly, trying not to be heard. In this tense and strange atmosphere, the president spoke. Nicole, we need you to resign by the end of this month. Excuse me? What do you mean? I asked, feeling bewildered. I've been informed by Jerry and Olivia that you've been billing excessive overtime. While other members of the tax department have around 16 hours of overtime per month, you've logged over 83 hours. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Jerry and Olivia haven't logged any overtime this month. Quite impressive, don't you think? The president looked at me sternly. The reason my overtime was so high this month was because I was covering Jerry and Olivia's workload. I wanted to explain, but blaming Jerry could make it seem like I couldn't manage my time. So I stuck to the facts. I haven't overbilled for overtime. It's because I couldn't finish my work within regular hours, I clarified. The president sighed deeply. I'm skeptical, but without evidence, I won't pursue it further. However, we can't continue to employ someone who works at that pace, so I need you to resign. The president seemed resolute, asking me to leave the company where I'd dedicated my entire 35-year career. I felt worn out too. No matter how much extra work I took on, it never seemed to be acknowledged. Instead, I ended up shouldering Jerry and Olivia's responsibilities as well. Yes, I understand. I'll resign at the end of this month, I repeated to the president, realizing I had already agreed to it. I glanced at Jerry and Olivia. They were smiling smugly, clearly pleased with the outcome. After leaving the president's office with them, Olivia sneered at me, saying, "Thanks for quitting." I just stared back at her silently. Jerry echoed the sentiment, looking down on me as well. "We're cutting labor costs. We don't need someone who takes advantage of overtime pay at our company," he added, seemingly pleased. As I watched them chat cheerfully, I began preparing handover documents for all my clients. It was important to ensure a smooth transition, so I made sure to personally say goodbye to those I was handing over to. I also tried to schedule a meeting with the president to bid farewell in person. For those I couldn't meet, I sent letters informing them of my successor. A week after resigning, I finally had a moment to relax at home. I had been swamped with handover tasks right up to my last day, and even before that, my workload had been heavy. A bit of relaxation seemed well-deserved. Just as I was thinking this, my phone rang. When I saw the call was from the company, I hesitated. I had already taken care of the social insurance procedures, so I ignored the first few calls. But they persisted, even calling from Jerry and Olivia's personal phones. Perhaps they hoped I would answer if it seemed urgent from the company. Eventually, feeling reluctant, I picked up. "Hello. Nicole, it's chaotic here," the president said urgently. "Who exactly are you?" I chuckled bitterly. "Who am I now? Just an unemployed woman. I've resigned from the company, so that's all I am at the moment." The president continued urgently. "Since you left, we've had 55 calls to halt transactions with the company. Please come back immediately." With that, he abruptly hung up. He sounded genuinely panicked. It seemed I had no choice but to return. Reluctantly, I got up and headed back to the company. As soon as I arrived, Jerry and Olivia were waiting for me. Their faces were pale, and they had dark circles under their eyes. "What's going on with both of you?" I asked, surprised by their sudden change in appearance. Jerry glared at me and said sharply, "Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions. Not just from your clients, but from potential new clients we were about to onboard. What did you do?" Olivia also eyed me suspiciously. "I never imagined Nicole would stoop so low." "I'm truly disappointed," Jerry remarked, his voice filled with disillusionment. The reason for their worn-out appearance was likely due to handling all the cancellations. I hadn't taken any actions against the clients, but I had a hunch why they were canceling their transactions. "Well, these cancellations seem inevitable now," I muttered quietly. "So you did do something," Jerry erupted. "Get to the president's office immediately." He then hurried me along to the president's office, with Olivia following closely. "President, I brought her," Jerry declared forcefully as he swung open the door, with Olivia entering hastily behind him. "I've been waiting," the president said, fixing his gaze on me. Jerry accused me as if I were the culprit. "It appears that Nicole was involved in the cancellation of transactions with our clients. We should not only have her resign, but also consider legal action for damages," Olivia argued vehemently, choosing her words carefully in front of the president. The president ignored Jerry and Olivia's interruptions and turned to me again. "Why did so many companies stop transactions after you left?" I took a deep breath and replied firmly, "It's simple. Our clients didn't just need basic tax management. They valued the personalized tax-saving strategies I'd offered. They could get cheaper services elsewhere, but they chose to stay with us because of the tailored approach I provided." Jerry snapped at me. "Who do you think you are to talk like that to the president? Do you really believe you're that indispensable?" Olivia taunted, "That's absurd. It has to be Nicole's doing." The president's expression was serious. Jerry and Olivia focus on operating strictly by the book, optimizing efficiency. But Nicole's approach involves more than that. It's about offering custom strategies that benefit our clients individually. One-size-fits-all solutions don't always meet our clients' needs, which is why many valued Nicole's contributions and chose to remain with us. Jerry grew visibly frustrated. "How can we justify spending so much time on each client's case? It's inefficient." "Yeah, it's not practical," Olivia added emphatically. The president sighed deeply and revealed, "Actually, I just spoke with Dad, the former president. Some of the clients who stopped transactions went directly to him to discuss Nicole." I was taken aback by this unexpected turn. I hadn't realized the extent to which clients valued my contributions. Dad mentioned that the tax department thrived because of Nicole. She not only managed her own clients exceptionally well but also supported her colleagues' clients, offering expertise that Jerry can't match. They also mentioned that if Nicole hadn't declined a promotion earlier, she would have been in a higher position than a department head by now, the president said with a troubled expression. "No way," Olivia exclaimed, clearly shocked. It seems she couldn't fathom the idea of me potentially being her superior. The president continued, his tone regretful. "I deeply apologize for asking you to resign, Nicole. Can we rescind your resignation? You're indispensable to our company." I was genuinely pleased by the president's change of heart, but I hesitated to accept it. Before I could respond, Jerry interrupted forcefully. "President, what do you mean she's better than me? I can't accept this." Jerry was visibly upset, his voice betraying his frustration. Olivia joined in, protesting. "Jerry is an excellent leader who genuinely cares for his team. Are you really favoring Nicole over him? That's unfair." The president fixed a stern look on them both. "In fact, since Nicole resigned, we've been receiving numerous complaints from the tax department. It seems that both of you have been offloading your responsibilities onto others, haven't you?" "What? That's not true." Jerry's face paled, his denial immediate. The president spoke with a look of disappointment. "I've heard from the staff. Jerry, you've been delegating the preparation of your clients' declaration forms to your subordinates, even assigning Olivia's workload to them for many clients." Beside Jerry, who grew visibly paler, Olivia trembled when her name was brought up. "There have been reports that you shifted your responsibilities onto Nicole before she resigned. Jerry, you even called her a time thief. It seems the roles have been reversed, haven't they?" The president sighed heavily. "No, that's not true," Jerry stammered, clearly flustered and unable to defend himself. Watching Jerry and Olivia both turn pale, the president continued sternly, "Furthermore, there have been reports of a relationship between you two. You've been seen leaving work together frequently. But Jerry, aren't you married?" The president's glare intensified as he looked at Jerry and Olivia. "I was simply mentoring Olivia in my role as her superior, nothing more," Jerry struggled to explain, but the president produced several receipts. "These are expense receipts flagged by the accounting department, dining expenses claimed by Jerry. Who were these meals with? Certainly not clients, right?" Jerry was sweating profusely, unable to answer. Olivia's face turned ashen. "Jerry and Olivia, not only have you neglected your responsibilities and inflated expense claims, but you've also engaged in an inappropriate relationship within the office, despite being married. According to company policy, I am terminating your employment effective immediately," the president stated calmly and decisively. Jerry and Olivia pleaded desperately. "Please wait. I'll retract the expense claims, just don't fire me." "I have a family," Jerry begged, trying to reverse his termination. Olivia echoed his plea. "Please, I don't want to lose my job. I'll apologize to Nicole and others for dumping work on them." Olivia was visibly on the brink of tears, realizing the gravity of being fired for neglecting her duties and having an affair with a superior. She must have been deeply concerned about her reputation. Trying to offer some advice, I said to Jerry and Olivia, "Why continue to resist? It's not helping your situation." Jerry shot me a glare. "Shut up? What could someone like you possibly understand?" I sighed and replied, "Jerry, it was your actions that led to my resignation. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Perhaps it's time for you to take responsibility and do some self-reflection." "Damn it," Jerry exclaimed in frustration, while Olivia bit her lip anxiously. "I haven't disclosed everything yet, but there's more to Jerry and Olivia's misconduct. Should I share more details?" I asked the president with a wry smile. The stories of Jerry and Olivia's behavior were widely known in the tax department, and their reputations had preceded them. "No, please don't. Nicole, please stop," they both pleaded urgently, trying to halt me. Giving them a firm ultimatum, I said misdeeds have a way of surfacing eventually. It might be in your best interest to confront reality before it escalates further. At my words, both Jerry and Olivia fell to their knees. The president wasted no time and terminated their employment on the spot. Later, I disclosed their wrongdoings, which included Jerry fabricating business trips to spend time with Olivia for days, as well as pressuring disliked colleagues to resign by unfairly reprimanding them and imposing sudden, unreasonable deadlines. Former employees who had resigned had asked me to keep quiet initially, but now that they were happily employed elsewhere, I felt it was appropriate to speak up. The president was incensed by the revelations. He expressed his anger by docking their final salaries and announced plans to conduct a thorough investigation into past inflated expense claims. Tearfully, Jerry pleaded with the president, "Please don't dock my salary. What will I say to my family?" Eventually, Jerry's affair with Olivia came to light to his wife, resulting in their divorce. Both now faced claims for compensation in the divorce proceedings. For some reason, Jerry reached out to me, pleading, "Please, can you convince the president to reconsider the termination? Olivia and I are in serious trouble now." Jerry and Olivia were having a hard time finding new jobs because the tax industry is tight-knit. If you mess up, everyone hears about it, and that makes it tough to get hired elsewhere. They really need money for their divorce settlement and living expenses, so they're doing manual labor on construction sites now. It's a big change from their usual office work. Olivia calls me crying often, saying, "Nicole, please help. I just wanted a raise and a better life," she would say tearfully, but I couldn't bring myself to help. I still vividly remembered the stress and problems they caused me. I would say to Olivia, "You made your choices, now you have to deal with them," I explained. "You can't expect sympathy when you never showed any to others." "But it's so tough," Olivia would cry. "I never thought it would turn out like this." "Actions have consequences," I replied. "You and Jerry brought this upon yourselves. You can't undo it now. You have to face the consequences of your actions." Olivia's despairing cries were the consequences of her own decisions. It was a tough lesson, but one she needed to learn. Meanwhile, I found solace in my new routine. Working at my friend's tax office was fulfilling. I enjoyed the work and the positive environment, unlike the toxic atmosphere Jerry and Olivia had created. The president's requests for my return became more frequent. "Please come back, Nicole, we really need you," he would urge. Each time I would politely decline, saying, "I'm sorry, but I've moved on." I appreciate the offer, though. Every day, starting my own office seemed like a clearer goal. In my own space, I could make the rules. No more unfair treatment or office politics. My focus would be on giving my clients the best service, building relationships based on trust and respect. In this new phase of my life, I finally felt at ease. I felt lighter, free from the burdens of the past. My days had purpose, and my nights were calm, without the anxiety that used to bother me. Looking ahead, I saw endless opportunities. I could learn more, face new challenges, and create something from scratch. My second chance was just beginning, and I was eager for what lay ahead. Freed from the negativity of my old job, I embraced the opportunities ahead with enthusiasm. As I planned my new business, I recalled the support and trust my clients had shown me. They were my motivation to stay in this field. Their faith in my abilities formed the bedrock of my new venture. With them in mind, I felt confident in my future success. Though my journey had been challenging, it had also made me resilient. Strengthened by my experiences, I was prepared to turn the page and embark on a new chapter with renewed vigor and a clear vision. Ultimately, Olivia and Jerry's setbacks served as a stark reminder of the importance of integrity and respect in the workplace. Their story underscored my commitment to fostering a positive and supportive environment in my own office. Moving forward, I carried the knowledge that I could overcome any obstacle. My determination and resilience had brought me this far and would continue to guide me in the future. My second chance wasn't just a continuation of the past, it was a fresh start filled with promise and potential.
The director of a school hired a mute woman with the intention of ridiculing her. One day he shuddered when he heard her speak 2 words. On a sunny afternoon in Philadelphia, Madeline Harris found herself once again leaning against a wall near the bustling city market. In front of her was an improvised sign that read, "Please help. I need any amount." The letters, though shaky, clearly spoke of her vulnerable situation, while her brown eyes scanned the faces of people, seeking a glimpse of solidarity. Rose Fernandez, the wife of the principal of a prestigious local school, was walking down the same street. Her gaze was drawn to Madeline, whose stillness amidst the noisy crowd seemed like a silent cry. Approaching, Rose felt a wave of compassion upon seeing the young woman in such a situation. There was something in Madeline's forced serenity that touched her deeply. "My name is Rose. Are you okay?" the woman asked, leaning slightly towards Madeline, trying to establish comforting eye contact. Madeline raised her eyes, meeting Rose's. Her response was a subtle nod, a non-verbal yet effective communication. She used her hands and gestures to indicate that she couldn't speak. Rose immediately understood Madeline's condition, and it moved her deeply. Her heart ached as she asked, "I am looking for someone to help at my husband's school. Would you be interested?" Madeline's reaction was instantaneous, her eyes lighting up with a glimmer of hope. She nodded, a gesture of gratitude clearly visible on her face. Rose helped Madeline to her feet, offering her arm in a gesture of support. "I will talk to my husband. I am sure we can find something for you to do." "Don't worry, we will take care of you," Rose said, starting to walk alongside Madeline towards the school. As they walked, Rose observed Madeline with admiration. The young woman, despite her condition, carried a silent dignity. Rose knew it wasn't just a matter of charity. She sincerely believed that Madeline would bring something special to the school, something that went beyond mere service. When Rose and Madeline arrived at the school, Classes had already ended and the school was empty. Knocking on the door and entering, Charles looked up from his papers, his expression of curiosity quickly turning to surprise and then to slight irritation. "Who is this young woman, Rose? And why did you bring her here, especially at this hour?" he questioned, his tone indicating a mild reprimand. "Charles, this is Madeline. I found her today and she is in a difficult situation. I would like you to give her an opportunity." "Charles, there's one more thing you need to know. Madeline is mute. She cannot speak." "And how is she going to work? We are talking about a position of responsibility here at the school. How will she communicate with others?" "This could be a problem," Charles responded, his concern for the school's safety and efficiency evident in his voice. Rose, however, was undeterred. "I believe this will not be a problem. Madeline is intelligent and capable. Give her a chance, Charles. This is about giving opportunities to those who need them," argued Rose, her conviction resonating in the small office. The discussion between the two extended for a few minutes, and finally Charles said, "All right," he agreed, still with hesitation. "I will find a position for her at the school," he said, looking at Madeline, who, despite not being able to express her gratitude verbally, had a sparkle of hope in her eyes. Rose smiled, relieved and grateful. "Thank you, Charles. I promise you won't regret it," she said, holding Madeline's hand, who smiled shyly. Charles was a man without empathy who liked to humiliate people. "I own this school. I am a man of prestige in this city," he would say arrogantly in his office. It was then that he devised a plan to humiliate Madeline. "I know what I will do with the mute girl." Charles summoned Madeline to his office. With cynicism he said, "Madeline, I have excellent news for you. You will have an excellent position here. You will have responsibilities. You will be our new waitress in the school cafeteria. Isn't that great?" Madeline, standing before Charles, remained firm, though surprise and apprehension were evident in her eyes. She knew this position was an obstacle placed in her path. The sadness of this realization weighed on her heart, but she nodded, accepting the decision. In her situation, refusing was not an option. After Madeline left the office, the door closing silently behind her, Charles remained silent for a moment, observing the now empty space. His face, tense with the expectation of his decision, now relaxed into an expression of victorious satisfaction. With a sigh of disdain disguised as reflection, he said, "Let's see how the mute girl does in the cafeteria," he murmured, the word laden with sarcasm and a hint of malicious curiosity. A cynical smile formed on his lips as he leaned back in his chair, hands crossed behind his head, contemplating the scene he had imagined. "She thinks she can overcome any challenge, doesn't she? Well, this will be interesting to watch. A waitress who can't speak. This will certainly become a spectacle," continued Charles, his voice tinged with a tone of cruel amusement. He imagined the students and teachers in the cafeteria, confused and impatient, waiting for service that, in his mind, would inevitably be inadequate. How will she handle a complicated order, or when someone is not satisfied? Oh, I can't wait to see the mess. Charles got up, walking to the window, looking distractedly at the schoolyard. Maybe this will teach her a lesson. Maybe it will teach that we shouldn't try to do more than we are capable of. He then laughed, a low sound devoid of true joy. The cafeteria will become the center of attention for all the wrong reasons, and when she fails, everyone will see that I was right from the beginning. Finally, he sighed, a mix of anticipation and unease filling his thoughts. The mute waitress, I've never seen anything like it. It's going to be funny. Anyway, I'll be here to set things right, he concluded, his voice low. In the following days, Madeline's adaptation to the position was closely watched by Charles, who expected to see her fail. He believed that by placing her in a role that required constant communication with students and teachers, her inability to speak would become an insurmountable problem. However, Madeline accepted the challenge with determination and courage and started using a small notebook and a pen to take orders, communicating effectively with the customers. As the weeks went by, Madeline's presence in the cafeteria became something many at the school were proud of, a demonstration of resilience and adaptation. Students and teachers admired Madeline. One teacher, visibly pleased after being served by Madeline, approached the counter with a smile. She expressed her gratitude, amazed by Madeline's ability to anticipate exactly what she needed, bringing joy to her day with such attention. At a nearby table, a group of students excitedly discussed Madeline's service. One of them, impressed, shared how she guessed his desire for extra sauce without him even asking, highlighting Madeline's remarkable ability to understand and meet their needs before they were expressed. Despite the general atmosphere of admiration and respect for Madeline in the cafeteria, Charles found a way to twist the situation to his advantage, driven by his insecurity and need to diminish Madeline's achievements. One afternoon, while watching from a distance as students and teachers expressed their gratitude and admiration for Madeline, Charles approached her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Do you really think these compliments are genuine, Madeline?" he began, his voice laden with poorly disguised cynicism. "People tend to exaggerate out of pity, you know." Madeline, for a moment, was visibly shaken by Charles's words, but she quickly composed herself, returning to her work with the same efficiency as always. Charles, however, was not satisfied with leaving things as they were. He continued, observing her serve a group of students with joy and efficiency. "Look, they smile, make orders, and thank you, but deep down they are just being polite. It's pity that moves them, not true admiration," he said. On another occasion, Charles approached a teacher who had just praised Madeline's service. "It's kind of you to encourage her this way," he commented, suggesting that the praise was a form of charity, not a legitimate recognition of Madeline's work. After the teacher left, Charles turned his attention back to Madeline, watching her with a look that mixed envy and disdain. "Don't be fooled, Madeline. The real world is not so kind. These compliments are just superficial," he murmured, trying to undermine her confidence. "Don't you find it curious how suddenly everyone has something good to say? Ask yourself why. The answer is simple: pity." Madeline, however, continued to demonstrate her skill and dedication, responding to the daily challenges with grace and efficiency, without allowing Charles's words to deeply affect her. Rose began to notice the change in her husband's behavior. She confronted him one night after dinner when they were alone. "Charles, I've noticed how you've been treating Madeline. Why are you acting this way towards her?" Her voice was filled with concern and disappointment. Charles shrugged, avoiding Rose's gaze. "She is a distraction, Rose. A poor girl who is here just because you insisted. She doesn't belong here," he responded, his voice revealing a coldness that Rose rarely saw in him. "But she is working hard, Charles. She deserves our respect, not our disdain," Rose insisted, her determination to defend Madeline as strong as ever. Madeline continued to receive praise and excel. Despite not being able to speak, she overcame obstacles and captivated everyone. Charles, watching from a distance, began to realize that the plan he believed was foolproof for Madeline's failure had actually backfired. He was filled with anger and resentment and started humiliating the young waitress once again. He did not miss an opportunity to criticize her, even for minor mistakes, and frequently made comments about her inability to defend herself verbally. "Look, the mute girl can't even respond. How convenient," he would say derisively. Madeline felt the weight of these comments, but her determination to stay at the school and prove her worth was stronger than any cruel word Charles could throw at her. She found comfort in Rose's support, and that of the other staff, who often expressed their solidarity and appreciation for her work. The situation reached a critical point when, during a team meeting, Charles made a derogatory comment about Madeline in front of everyone. "We have to do all the work and still take care of the mute girl here. Is this really what we want for our school?" His attempt to undermine Madeline's position at the school was met with shocked and disapproving looks from those present. Rose, unable to contain her indignation, responded firmly, "Charles, enough. Madeline is part of our team and deserves to be treated with the same respect as any of us. Your attitude is unacceptable and does not reflect the values our school stands for." After Rose's firm reprimand, Charles was momentarily silent, surprised by the intensity of his reaction. Charles then adopted a milder tone. "You are right, Rose. I let my frustrations get the better of me, and that was unfair. Not just to Madeline, but to all of you," Charles admitted, his voice filled with a newfound understanding and humility. Rose, still visibly affected, said, "It is important that we remember who we are and what we represent, especially in an educational community. Our students learn from us, not just through lessons, but through our behavior," she responded, reinforcing the importance of the school's values. Charles nodded in agreement. "I promise to do better. and I'll start with an apology to Madeline. She did not deserve the treatment she received from me, he said, showing a genuine willingness to change and make amends. However, Charles's apparent change in behavior lasted only a few days. Despite his promises and the apology to Madeline, old habits proved hard to break. On a particularly tough day, after Charles made a rude comment, Madeline looked him directly in the eyes. There were no words, but the message was clear. Her gaze conveyed a strength and courage that words could not express. Charles tried to maintain his authoritative stance. "What do you think you're doing, huh? Do you think you can confront me with that look?" He attempted to mock her, but his voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Madeline's courage unsettled him, challenging his perception of her as someone fragile and defenseless. Rose witnessed the scene, and later, in private, she confronted Charles again. "Did you see her courage, Charles? Why do you continue treating her this way? This has to stop," Rose insisted, the frustration evident in her voice. Charles responded, "I only hired this mute girl because you insisted I did a charity. I think it's time for her to look for another job elsewhere. A place more suitable for her, if you know what I mean." Rose, facing Charles's relentless decision, tried to defend Madeline. "Charles, this isn't fair. Madeline has worked hard and overcome obstacles that many of us can't even imagine. She deserves to be here just as much as any of us. We can't abandon her now when she needs our support the most." Charles expressed his decision as final. "She shouldn't be here, Rose. She is a constant reminder of our failure to keep the school as we wanted," Charles revealed, his voice filled with frustration and determination. "I will fire her at the end of the day. The school is mine." Charles walked towards the cafeteria, driven by an urge to check how Madeline was doing after the busy school day ended. The cafeteria was quiet, the calm after the daily storm, with only the soft hum of the refrigerators filling the space. Madeline was there, organizing the last items, her demeanor calm yet focused, a testament to her dedication. Suddenly the door opened with a soft creak, breaking the silence. A man entered, his presence unexpected at this late hour. Upon seeing him, Madeline froze, and words escaped involuntarily from her lips. "Oh my God." The surprise in her voice was evident, a whisper laden with shock and recognition. Charles, who was about to speak to Madeline, stopped upon hearing her voice. His surprise quickly turned to suspicion and confusion. "You spoke!" he exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. Madeline, realizing the gravity of the situation, turned to face Charles, her eyes wide with fear. She shook her head vigorously in denial, her lips pressed into a firm line, trying to communicate that he was mistaken. "No, I heard you speaking just now," Charles insisted, his tone increasing, marked by a defiant insistence. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his posture conveying an authority he expected to be uncontested. Madeline, desperate to clarify the misunderstanding, quickly grabbed her notebook and wrote with trembling hands, "I am mute. I did not speak." She showed the message to Charles, her eyes pleading for understanding. Charles, however, was not willing to back down. "This is impossible." "I know what I heard," he retorted, rejecting Madeline's written explanation with a wave of his hand. His conviction was firm, fueled by the initial surprise of hearing her speak. The tension between them grew, the air charged with a mix of confusion and challenge. Madeline felt cornered, her inability to speak becoming, strangely, both her most convincing defense and her deepest vulnerability. "You are lying, Madeline. Why would you lie about this?" Charles continued, his frustration and curiosity intertwined in his voice. He looked at Madeline, searching for signs of deception, unable to reconcile what he believed he heard with the reality of Madeline's condition. At that moment of impasse, the truth of the situation remained obscured, word against the lack thereof. Madeline, despite Charles's insistence, stood firm in her denial. This situation opened an abyss of distrust. Realizing that the discussion with Charles was becoming increasingly tense, Madeline made a quick hand gesture, signaling that she needed to go to the bathroom. Without waiting for a response, she quickly walked away, leaving Charles standing alone in the middle of the cafeteria, still confused and frustrated. Meanwhile, the customer who had entered waited patiently. Another staff member, noticing that Madeline had left and that Charles was too disturbed to serve, approached the customer with a friendly smile and served the young man. Charles, for his part, remained motionless for a moment, looking in the direction where Madeline had gone. His thoughts whirled in a maelstrom of doubts and speculations. I heard her speak. I am sure, he murmured to himself, his mind refusing to accept any other explanation. What is happening? Is she deceiving us? Charles pondered, suspicion gnawing at any previous logic. His conviction about what he believed he had heard clashed directly with the reality of Madeline's condition. Could she have been able to speak all along and chose not to? But why? What would be the purpose? The questions piled up, each feeding further into his confusion and mistrust. Madeline returned from the bathroom and signaled to Charles, indicating that she needed to speak with him in his office. Charles, still immersed in his conflicting thoughts, followed her, curious to learn the truth. Upon entering the office, Madeline sat across from Charles, her notebook ready. Calmly, she began to write, her words carefully chosen to clarify the confusion. I have a sore throat and coughed, she wrote, looking at Charles, hoping that her written words would dispel the doubt that had arisen. Charles read the message, his expression gradually changing from suspicion to confusion. He had expected a confession, not such a simple yet plausible explanation. Madeline, sensing his hesitation, continued writing, I was born mute. Madeline's words, so clear and definitive in her notebook, forced Charles to confront the reality of the situation. He was sure of what he had heard, but Madeline's explanations made sense. The possibility that he had misinterpreted the situation began to infiltrate his mind. Charles nodded, more to himself than to Madeline, still processing the information. I understand, he finally said, his voice revealing the reluctance to completely abandon his suspicions. You can go home now, Madeline. See you tomorrow. Despite his verbal response, Charles was left with a lingering doubt. Madeline's explanation, though reasonable, did not completely erase the doubt that had settled in his mind. Madeline, relieved to have had the chance to explain herself, nodded in a gesture of gratitude, but aware of Charles's persistent doubt. She knew that lost trust would need to be regained, not with words but through her actions and ongoing commitment to her work. Charles remained pensive. The idea of confronting Madeline again about the incident tempted him, but he knew he needed a more cautious approach. I need to observe her more closely, he decided, planning to keep a discreet watch over Madeline in the coming days. Charles also recognized the need not to make mistakes. If I am wrong, accusing her unjustly could cause more harm than good, and if I am right, I need more proof before taking any action. He arrived home and spoke with his wife. Rose, have you noticed anything strange about Madeline recently? The question, laden with hesitation, revealed more about his state of mind than he intended. Rose looked up from her book, surprised by the unexpected question. Strange, how so? Her curiosity was immediately piqued, sensing the seriousness with which Charles presented the issue. Charles sighed, sitting next to her. Today in the cafeteria, I thought I heard Madeline speak. He paused, seeking in Rose's reaction, some sign that she shared his suspicions. Rose watched him closely, processing his words. Charles, you know Madeline is mute. She doesn't speak, she replied, trying to understand the origin of such confusion. I know, Charles continued, frustrated with his own uncertainty. But I swear I heard something, and when I confronted her, she denied it, of course. She wrote that she had a sore throat and had coughed. The explanation sounded weak even to his own ears. Rose pondered for a moment, trying to find a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, Charles. Madeline has been through so many hardships. Why would she lie about something like that? That's exactly what I can't understand, Charles admitted, his expression heavy with confusion. But what if she is hiding something from us? What if there's something we don't know about her? Rose reached for Charles's hand, offering a gesture of support. Charles, trust me, I know Madeline. She is sincere and hard-working. Maybe it's time to trust her more and less in these unfounded suspicions. What really matters is how she behaves and the work she does, not a supposed word you think you heard. The conversation extended into the night, with Rose trying to steer Charles away from his worries, emphasizing the importance of trust and understanding within the school community. In the days following that conversation at home, Charles observed from afar, his eyes always searching, always questioning. Every gesture of hers, every interaction seemed to carry greater weight, a possible clue to the mystery Charles felt had unfolded that afternoon in the cafeteria. During this period, the young man who entered the cafeteria on the day of the incident became an official employee of the school. His name was Jordan, and he assumed the role of gatekeeper, a friendly presence who greeted students and teachers every day. Charles noticed something curious in the interactions, or lack thereof, between Madeline and Jordan. Every time Madeline passed by the school gate, her step quickened, her gaze averted, and a subtle but noticeable tension took over her. It was as if she did everything to avoid crossing paths with him, a reaction that did not go unnoticed by Charles's watchful eyes. Jordan, for his part, seemed oblivious, or at least did not show any awareness of Madeline's anxiety. He continued his tasks with the same disposition and smile on his face, greeting everyone who passed by the entrance with a friendly wave or a brief comment about the day. Charles's curiosity was piqued by Madeline's evident unease. Why does she behave like this around Jordan, he wondered. Could he be the key to understanding what happened that day in the cafeteria? Determined to find answers one afternoon, Charles decided to casually approach Jordan, trying to probe for any possible connection between him and Madeline. "Jordan, how are you adapting to the new position? Have you noticed anything interesting lately?" Charles asked, trying to appear uninterested. Charles's attention. Madeline, in a moment of distraction, saw Jordan talking animatedly with a student near the school entrance. The sight triggered an immediate reaction in Madeline, whose heart raced, overwhelmed by uncontrollable fear. Charles, who was at a safe distance, watched the scene unfold. He saw Madeline's hands begin to tremble almost imperceptibly at first, but soon the intensity increased to the point that her notebook slipped from her fingers and fell to the ground, the pages scattering like silent witnesses to her distress. Moved by a sudden impulse of concern, Charles quickly approached. "Let me help," he said, bending down to gather the scattered notebook and pages. As he did so, he couldn't help but notice the state of nervousness in which Madeline found herself. Gently, he guided Madeline to his office, offering her a refuge from the whirlwind of emotions that clearly beset her. Inside, he handed her a glass of water, hoping that the simple gesture could offer some comfort. "Is everything okay, Madeline?" he asked, his voice tinged with a genuine concern he rarely allowed himself to show. Madeline, still unable to control the emotional turmoil triggered by the sight of Jordan, found herself overwhelmed, and tears began to stream freely down her face. Charles, faced with this display of vulnerability, felt even more concerned. A real and deep worry for Madeline took hold of him, unlike anything he had felt before. In his thoughts, Charles began to contemplate the possibility that Jordan might have done something to harm Madeline. "Did he do something to you?" Charles questioned, his voice low, filled with a mix of apprehension and concern. Madeline struggled to compose herself but could not formulate a clear response. The complexity of her emotions made it difficult to express the fear and anxiety that the sight of Jordan had triggered. Charles, now completely immersed in his concern for Madeline, could no longer contain his growing suspicion about the nature of the relationship between her and Jordan. "Jordan did something to you. It must be that," he said, his voice laden with a certainty and an unyielding determination. He was ready to take drastic measures. "I will go to the police," he announced, looking intently at Madeline. "No, don't go to the police, I beg you." The voice, clear and unmistakable, cut through the tense air like a knife. It was a moment that seemed to suspend time, leaving a disconcerting silence. Charles froze, Madeline's words echoing in his mind. It was the second time he had heard her speak. Now he had no doubts. Madeline was not mute. For a moment all he could do was stare at Madeline, his expression a mix of shock, confusion, and a growing sense of betrayal. You can speak. I knew it, I was sure," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Madeline, realizing the consequences of her words, began to cry again. She found herself unable to hide the truth of her condition any longer. I can't explain right now," she managed to say between sobs, her words marked by palpable desperation. The truth was much more complicated than simply the ability to speak or not. There were deep and personal reasons that had led her to hide her voice from the world. Charles, still in shock. "Why did you hide this?" he asked, his voice softened by concern and a sincere desire to understand. The revelation that she could speak did not resolve the mystery. It only deepened it. Madeline, struggling to compose herself, looked at Charles with pleading eyes. "Please, give me some time. I promise I will explain everything," she said, her voice a trembling whisper of promise and plea. "Please, for the love of God, don't go to the police. Going to the police could be very dangerous. Not just for me, but for you and all the children at the school, she implored with palpable urgency in her voice. Charles, stunned by the sudden change in tone and the seriousness of Madeline's implications, sat down trying to process the information. Dangerous? How so? What did Jordan do? He questioned, his previous concern transforming into alarm. Madeline hesitated, the words caught in her throat. The decision to reveal more about her situation was terrifying, but she knew she had few options. Jordan, he is not who he seems to be, and if he finds out that I said anything, we all will be in great danger, she revealed, the confession coming out in a rushed whisper. She looked at Charles, searching for some sign of understanding. I think it's best to fire Jordan, for the children's sake, for everyone's safety at the school, Madeline suggested. Charles remained silent, absorbing Madeline's words. The suggestion to fire Jordan without concrete proof of his guilt was problematic. But we need a valid reason to fire him. You have to tell me what you know, Charles pondered aloud. The atmosphere in Charles's office was charged with tension. The mystery enveloped both Charles and Madeline. After her plea for Charles not to go to the police, a tense silence settled between them, each processing the gravity of the situation in their own way. Charles, driven by a mix of concern and confusion, broke the silence. I will call Jordan here to the office to resolve this matter once and for all, he pressed. Charles, for the love of God, don't do that. My life will be in danger if people find out, she revealed, her words laden with fear. Charles recoiled, surprised by the intensity of Madeline's plea. The idea that Madeline's ability to speak could be dangerous was almost unbelievable, yet the fear in her eyes was undeniably real. But who would put you in danger, Madeline? Who would benefit from keeping you silent? Charles questioned, trying to unravel the labyrinth of secrets and fears that Madeline seemed to carry. I can't say, Charles. I really can't, she repeated, her insistence marking the depth of her dilemma. All right, Madeline, I won't press you any further, Charles finally conceded, his decision reflecting both his concern for her safety and his respect for her boundaries. But know that I am here to help. Whatever you are facing, you don't have to face it alone. Madeline nodded, grateful for Charles's understanding, though the shadow of her unspoken secrets continued to hang between them. The request for Madeline to keep her ability to speak a secret became a new burden for Charles, a secret he promised to keep, even without fully understanding the dangers lurking in the shadows of the unrevealed truth. After her tense conversation with Charles, Madeline returned to her rented apartment, which bore little resemblance to the life she had left behind. Her current home was small and simple, a physical representation of how much her life had changed since she decided to move to Philadelphia. Far from the comforts and security of her affluent family, she now lived in the shadow of constant fear, a price she chose to pay for safety. The decision to live as a mute was not made lightly. It was a protection, a veil of silence she hoped would keep her hidden from the criminals whose actions she had discovered. Madeline knew too much, and she found herself lost in thought, reliving the moment that changed her life forever. She vividly remembered the crime she had witnessed. What if this happens to these children too? The fear that a similar fate could befall the innocent children of the school tormented her, a worry that had intensified since Jordan's arrival. That night she could not sleep. She paced back and forth in the apartment, trying to make a decision. At dawn, still sleepless, Madeline decided she would stay in Philadelphia and face whatever came her way. I have to protect these children, no matter what happens to me, she said to herself, feeling a bit of peace with her decision. But the peace was short-lived. And Jordan? What do I do about him? Madeline asked herself, remembering the fear she felt seeing him at the school. I have to find a way to get him out of the school, without putting anyone in danger. On a morning of palpable tension, Madeline decided it was time to share the truth with Charles. With determined steps but carrying a weight of worry, she entered Charles's office, her gaze firm, signaling the gravity of what she was about to reveal. Charles, you need to know something important about Jordan, about the danger he represents, Madeline began, her voice firm but laden with latent fear. She recounted how, months before arriving in Philadelphia, she had accidentally found herself in the middle of a police investigation. I was walking through a more isolated area of the city when I heard voices coming from an abandoned warehouse. Curious, I approached and saw something I never imagined: a gang kidnapping children to make them work forcibly on a farm. Madeline paused, the horror of the memory painting shadows on her face. I didn't think twice. I went straight to the police to report what I saw. They started an investigation, but one of the criminals began to suspect me. They knew someone from outside had discovered the scheme, she continued, her voice a little lower, revealing the growing tension from that time. Madeline then explained the unusual suggestion from a police officer. She suggested I pretend to be mute. If they tried to confront me, they wouldn't be able to get anything out of me. And it happened, Charles. One day, one of them cornered me on the street, but I just gestured, pretending not to understand, unable to respond. The memory of her desperate but necessary act shone in her eyes. A friend of the police officer was passing by and intervened, defending me and reinforcing the lie that I was mute. The criminal believed it and left me alone, but the suspicion never completely disappeared. Madeline sighed, the weight of the past still visible on her shoulders. When the gang was finally arrested, I heard conversations, rumors that there were still people who suspected me. It was an international network, Charles, very dangerous. The police advised me to move to another city, change my life for my own safety. And that's what I did. I came to Philadelphia hoping to start over, far from danger, but always with the fear of being discovered. Madeline sighed deeply. My peace was interrupted when I saw Jordan for the first time here in Philadelphia. It was not a coincidence. He was one of the members of that gang, she revealed, her gaze lost in the void of painful memories. The revelation left the air between them heavy, each word from Madeline adding weight to the silence that followed. Charles, upon hearing this, felt a wave of shock course through his body. The information was a lot to process. You are telling me that Jordan, he is part of this criminal network? And he is here in our school? Charles's voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the urgency to act in light of this new and dangerous reality. Madeline nodded, the sadness in her eyes giving way to a determined gleam. Yes, and that's why I was so scared. It's not just my life that's at risk, but also the lives of the children at the school. If he's here, it's because they are still looking for me, and I don't know how far they will go to find me. The genuine concern in her voice underscored the gravity of the situation. Charles stood up, starting to pace back and forth in the office, trying to assimilate what Madeline had said. We need to act, and quickly. We can't let Jordan or whoever is with him pose a threat to you or the children. The resolution in his voice was palpable, a testament to his will to protect everyone at any cost. But how? If we go to the police now and they find out, it could put everyone in even greater danger. And if Jordan realizes we're suspecting him? Madeline questioned, her mind running through possible scenarios, each more dangerous than the last. Charles stopped, facing Madeline with an expression of someone who had made a decision. We will devise a plan, something that allows us to gather more evidence against him without raising suspicion, and I will ensure the school discreetly reinforces security. We will protect you and the children, Madeline, no matter what happens. Charles's promise was firm, marking a commitment not only to Madeline's safety, but to the entire school community. The conversation between them extended for hours, outlining strategies and preparing for the uncertain days ahead. Madeline felt a mixture of relief and apprehension, relief for finally sharing her burden with someone willing to help and apprehension for what this decision could trigger. Charles, knowing he needed to act quickly, remembered an old friend who worked in the police. Determined, he picked up the phone and dialed the number. When his friend answered, Charles got straight to the point. I need your help. We have a serious situation here at the school involving a possible member of a child kidnapping gang. The police friend, surprised, responded seriously. Charles, this is serious. Give me all the information you have. We will start investigating immediately. Charles shared everything he knew about Jordan, omitting Madeline's identity to protect her, but giving his friend enough details for the police to act. His name is Jordan. He's working as a gatekeeper here at the school. Madeline, a reliable source, informed me that he is part of this gang. In the following days, the tension was palpable. Charles watched every move Jordan made while keeping in frequent contact with his friend in the police. Until, finally, the day of action arrived. Without warning, the police arrived at the school. Charles's friend led the team. While the students were kept safe in their classrooms, the police headed to the gate. Charles watched as they approached Jordan, who was taken by surprise. "Jordan, you are under arrest on suspicion of involvement in child kidnapping," announced the officer, handcuffing him. Jordan was taken away, and Charles finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing the children were safe, at least for now. Later, Charles spoke with Madeline about the arrest. "They got him, Madeline. He was here to select victims for the gang. The police confirmed it." Madeline, with tears in her eyes, could only say, "Thank you, Charles. You have no idea how much this means. You protected not only me but all the children here." After Jordan's arrest and the revelation of his malicious intentions, the atmosphere between Charles and Madeline began to transform. One day, they met in Charles's office to reflect on the events and discuss what the future held. "I can't believe it's finally over," said Madeline, a cautious smile appearing on her face for the first time in a long time. "The police said I no longer need to pretend to be mute. I can finally be free, Charles." Charles, looking at Madeline, felt a wave of emotion. The struggle they had faced together, the uncertainties and the fear, all seemed to have led to this moment of liberation. "That's amazing, Madeline. You have no idea how happy I am for you. Finally, you can start living without fear." The air between them was charged with a sense of victory, but also introspection. Charles, recalling his own actions and doubts along the way, knew there was something that needed to be said. "Madeline, I need to apologize," he began, hesitant. "For all the times I treated you poorly, for all the stress I caused. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Madeline listened, Charles's words touching her deeply. "I don't hold any grudges against you. There were tough moments, but look at what we achieved together." Madeline held Charles's hand, a gesture of forgiveness and understanding. "We learned from each other, Charles, and now we can look forward to a future, one that I hope will be more peaceful for all of us." Charles nodded, a feeling of gratitude filling his heart. "We will do whatever it takes to ensure the school is always a safe place, and Madeline, I will be by your side no matter what comes. You showed me the true meaning of courage." And so, amidst apologies and gratitude, Charles and Madeline found a new beginning. With the newfound freedom to live without the veil of silence, Madeline began to live her life differently. Being able to express herself freely brought a new light to her eyes, a flame of hope and determination that illuminated her path. The community of Philadelphia, upon discovering Madeline's true story, was initially shocked by what she had faced, but this surprise soon gave way to deep admiration for the courage and resilience she had shown. It didn't take long for Madeline to find a new calling that allowed her not only to express herself, but also to make a difference in the lives of others, becoming a teacher at the school where it all began. Her unique way of teaching, combining empathy, understanding, and a sincere desire to see each student thrive, quickly made her one of the most beloved and respected teachers at the institution. Charles watched Madeline's transformation with a mix of admiration and joy. Seeing her in front of the classroom, sharing her knowledge and passion for learning, reinforced how far they had come from those dark days. "You really have a gift for this," he said to her after watching one of her classes, his words laden with genuine pride. Madeline smiled, grateful for his words and the opportunity to start anew. "Teaching gives me a sense of purpose, Charles. It's like all the experiences I went through were just preparations for this moment, to really make a difference," she shared, her eyes shining with a passion that could not be masked. After the events that unveiled Madeline's true story and the threat Jordan posed, Charles, who once might have been quick to judge and hesitant to trust, now found himself reflecting on the value of respect and understanding. One day, while walking through the school halls, Charles observed the faces of the students, each carrying their own untold story. "You never know what someone is going through," he murmured to himself, a lesson he had learned in the most intense way possible. This thought reminded him of how he had been with Madeline at the beginning, how his doubts and suspicions had almost jeopardized the operation to protect the school and its children. In a teachers' meeting, Charles expressed his reflections. "I believe it's crucial that we create an environment where everyone feels safe to share their stories without fear of judgment," he proposed, his voice firm but filled with warmth. His speech was met with nods of agreement and murmurs of approval, a sign that his transformation was beginning to influence others around him. His change was particularly noticed by Madeline, who saw him become an even more fervent advocate for the students and teachers. "You have changed, Charles, for the better," she commented one day, a soft smile on her lips. "You have always been a good principal, but now you are a truly inspiring leader." Charles smiled in response, grateful for Madeline's constant presence and support. "I learned from the best," he replied, nodding towards Madeline. "Your courage, your strength to face the past and protect our students, that inspired me to be a better person, to truly understand the value of respect." There was a pause, and Charles looked at Madeline, his expression becoming more serious. "You know, Madeline, before all this happened, I don't think I really understood the impact that words and actions can have. Judging someone without knowing their whole story, I was wrong. And I'm sorry for any moment my actions might have made someone feel less welcome here." Madeline lightly touched Charles's arm. "Charles, we all learn and grow. What matters is what we do with the lessons life teaches us. And you chose to open your heart, to change for the better. That's more than many people can do." Charles took Madeline's hand, grateful. "I had a great teacher," he said with a smile jokingly, "but seriously, I hope to continue this work, improving the school not just for our students, but for everyone who is part of this community." Rose was proud of her husband. She knew, from the moment she met Madeline on the street, that she had something special. Observing Charles's transformation, seeing him change, reinforced the respect she felt for him. This experience turned Charles into a compassionate person, increasing the admiration Rose felt for him. Rose felt immense pride not just for what Charles did, but for who he chose to be. He became an unwavering advocate for the well-being and safety of the students, reflecting in every decision the positive influence that Madeline had brought into his life, that is, the courage to face his own fears and prejudices. Charles and Madeline had not only initiated a transformation in themselves, but in the entire school environment. Since then, Charles made sure to implement programs at the school focused on empathy, mutual respect, and open communication. He wanted the school to be a refuge, not just from physical danger, but also from the shadows of judgment and misunderstanding. Thus, Madeline's story and Charles's change served as powerful testimonies that, even in the darkest moments, mutual understanding and respect can bring light and hope. It is an example that true strength lies in the ability to look beyond appearances, to listen without judging, and to act with compassion and understanding. Madeline, by overcoming her fear and showing her voice, became a symbol of courage and inspired the school community. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. This helps me to continue sharing amazing stories every day. Don't miss the next surprising story that now appears on your screen. Thank you so much for your support. See you soon.
The mother complained about her daughter-in-law to her son, and before he left for a business trip, he decided to install a hidden camera. When he saw the recordings, he was horrified by what he watched. At the moment Esther arrived at the house, she would from then on share with Eduardo, her fiancé, and his mother, Paola. A feeling of discomfort took hold of her, although she tried to hide it with a smile. Eduardo, always attentive, noticed Esther's hesitation and quickly intervened. "Love, I know all this is new for you, especially now that we're close to our wedding, but I promise my mother and I will make you feel at home," he said, trying to ease her worries with a gentle touch on her shoulder. Esther, despite appreciating Eduardo's effort, still felt a growing restlessness, a premonition that adapting would not be as simple as her fiancé imagined. Paola observed the interaction between Esther and Eduardo from a safe distance. Her smile was polite, but her eyes did not hide a spark of disapproval and jealousy of her son. "Welcome to the family, Esther. I hope you find everything you need here," said Paola, with a voice that carried a weight Esther could not decipher. It was a welcome that sounded more like a warning, and Esther wondered if she would ever truly feel at ease while sharing the house with her mother-in-law, or if this could bring problems for their relationship. In the days that followed, while Eduardo was immersed in his work commitments, Esther tried to adapt to her new life. The house, though beautiful, seemed a maze of unspoken rules and silent expectations, with Paola showing herself to be a good person yet strict. "Esther, we have a specific way of doing things around here. I think it would be better if you let me show you how we take care of our home for now, and then I'll pass some tasks on to you," Paola suggested, her offer sounding more like an imposition. Esther, wanting to avoid conflicts, agreed, although each of Paola's instructions seemed to diminish her autonomy in the new house even further. Eduardo, for his part, was oblivious to Esther's growing discomfort. He saw his mother as a pillar of strength and Esther as the new light of his life, unable to notice the tension between the two. "Esther, are you feeling okay? You seem a bit down lately. You can tell me anything," he asked one day, genuinely concerned, but unaware of the depth of Esther's feelings. "I'm fine, Eduardo. Just adjusting," she replied, forcing a smile, not wanting to worry him or cause a division in the family. On one specific evening, Eduardo announced the trip he would take. "The company called me today, and I have to take a trip to Guadalajara the day after tomorrow to sort out a new contract with an investor, and I will have to stay there for a few days. You'll be fine in my absence, right?" Esther felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She desired some space to breathe, away from Paula's constant gaze, but also feared the loneliness and isolation in her mother-in-law's dominating presence. "Eduardo, I'll miss you, but I think a bit of time alone with your mother might perhaps help us to get to know each other better," Esther said, trying to convince herself as much as him. Eduardo, optimistic, agreed with his fiancée. "That sounds wonderful, love. I'm sure you two will get along well." At the dawn of the day marking Eduardo's departure, the house pulsed with a subtly altered energy, a mix of anticipation and restlessness. Eduardo, amidst his final preparations, did not fail to express his concern for Esther and his trust in his mother to take care of her. "Esther, I've installed cameras at strategic points around the house. I want you to feel safe, especially while I'm away," he explained, detailing the security system's operation with meticulous care. Esther watched, absorbing every word, a mix of gratitude and nervousness reflected in her gaze. Paula was observing the conversation from a distance, her expression inscrutable. When Eduardo turned to her, his tone was pleading, emphasizing the importance of his trust in her. "Mom, please take care of Esther. You know how much she means to me," Eduardo said, the sincerity in his voice evident. Paula nodded, a silent promise between mother and son. "Don't worry, Eduardo. I'll treat Esther as if she were my own daughter," she replied. But the promise seemed to carry a weight that only Esther felt, like the fear of being without her fiancé by her side. In the final moments before his departure, Eduardo and Esther shared a goodbye filled with emotions. "I'll miss you every second," Eduardo confessed, embracing Esther with an intensity that tried to make up for the imminent distance. "Me too, but I'll be waiting for you," Esther responded, trying to infuse each word with optimism. It was a farewell full of unspoken promises, an understanding that the following days would be a test for both of them. Later that day, with Eduardo's departure, the dynamics of the house changed drastically. Paula, who had previously shown herself to be kind and understanding in her son's presence, now revealed her true face. "Esther, I hope you don't mind, but I prefer to cook all the meals from now on. You need to focus on settling into the house, and I simply prefer things my way, and I don't think you have any problem with that," Paula declared, taking control of the kitchen. Esther, though reluctant, didn't have the energy to protest. "Of course, Paula. Thank you for helping," she said, trying to hide her apprehension with a weak smile. The day Eduardo left, the dynamics inside the house began to change in a subtle but noticeable way. Eduardo's absence was immediately felt by Esther, who now found herself alone with Paula, the matriarch who until then had maintained a facade of cordiality. Paula's true nature began to reveal itself on the first morning without Eduardo. She entered the kitchen where Esther was trying to prepare her breakfast. "Let me do that, Esther. You're still settling in and I want you to rest," Paula insisted. But her tone was no longer offering, it was commanding. Esther, sensing the change in tone, felt a twinge of anxiety. "I really appreciate your help, Paula, but I'd like to try doing some things on my own. It's important for me to feel useful. I enjoy it," Esther responded, hoping to find some common ground. However, Paula did not yield. "Esther, I insist. You're not in any condition to exert yourself. Besides, Eduardo asked me to take care of everything while he's away. We wouldn't want to disappoint him, would we?" The way Paula invoked Eduardo's name as a weapon of authority made it clear that any attempt at resistance would be futile. As the days passed, Paula began to impose more rules, each limiting Esther's freedom within her own home even further. She determined meal times, rest periods, and even the TV programs that Esther could watch. "Esther, it's for your own good. You need structure to recover properly," Paula explained, but the concern sounded more and more like control. Esther felt her autonomy being stolen more and more, replaced by a strict routine that Paula meticulously orchestrated. One afternoon, while Esther was sitting in the garden trying to read, Paula approached with a tray of tea. "Here, dear, drink this. It'll make you feel better," Paula said, extending the cup. Esther accepted, but her stomach twisted. "Paula, I was thinking maybe I could start taking light walks around the neighborhood. I think the fresh air could do me good and distract my mind," Esther suggested, seeking some way to escape, even if just for brief moments from the constant surveillance. "Oh, no, Paula quickly rejected the idea. "You're still too weak to go out. We can't risk your health. Besides, I would never forgive myself if something happened to you under my watch." The relationship between Esther and Paula became more tense each day, with Paula constantly criticizing Esther's attempts to participate in household chores or to take any initiative on her own. "Esther, why do you insist on doing these things?" "I've already told you that I'll take care of everything. You just need to focus on getting better," Paula reprimanded, her words sounding more like orders than advice. Esther, feeling increasingly isolated and powerless, began to question her own perceptions and the reality of her situation. The house, which was supposed to be her sanctuary, had turned into a kind of prison. That morning, as the sun began to cast its first lights over the city, the house seemed strangely quiet, a quietness that preceded the storm. Paula was in the kitchen, her imposing figure dominating the space with unquestionable authority. Esther descended the stairs, the sounds of her steps echoing against the silence, finding Paula already preparing breakfast. "Today I prepared something special for you, Esther. A recipe I learned from my mother, something that will surely help you feel better," Paula announced, without turning to face Esther, who was approaching. Paula's voice was calm, but there was something in it, a certain tension that Esther couldn't ignore. Esther looked at the dish being served. There was something about it that didn't seem right, a mix of colors and aromas that was unfamiliar to her. "Thank you, Paula. It looks really delicious," Esther responded, her voice trembling, betraying all the apprehension she felt. As she picked up the fork, her hand shook slightly, suspicion growing inside her for being with someone she didn't know well. She thought to herself, "What if her food is really bad and I can't eat it? This mix doesn't look very inviting." "I insist that you eat everything, Esther. It's important to get strong and healthy," Paula pressed, finally turning to observe Esther with a look that seemed to measure each reaction. Esther nodded, forcing a smile as she took the first bite. The taste was strange, something bitter that hid under the mix of spices, causing an immediate nausea that Esther struggled to disguise, aiming not to embarrass her mother-in-law or herself. After breakfast, Paula retired to the garden, leaving Esther alone with her thoughts. The house, which was supposed to be her refuge, now felt like a cage. "I need to find out what she put in the food, and we have to talk about this. I don't remember being allergic to anything, and I know she's just trying to do her best for me. Eduardo will hate it if he even imagines that I'm not cooperating," Esther thought, determination growing within her. It was an unknown game being played, and Esther knew she needed to be cautious in her next steps. Esther took advantage of Paula's absence to inspect the kitchen, looking for any clue that might explain the discomfort she felt after meals. She searched through cabinets and drawers. Her meticulous search, however, revealed nothing immediately suspicious. Frustrated, she realized she would need a more elaborate plan to uncover the secrets that Paula's poor cooking skills hid and perhaps solve the problem peacefully. Reaching the end of another day under the same roof as Paula, Esther found herself at a crossroads of emotions and suspicions. The living room, bathed in the soft light of dusk, served as the stage for a silent confrontation between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. "Paula, I was thinking, maybe I should start participating more actively in the household chores, including in the kitchen. After all, I can't depend on you for everything. It's not fair," Esther began, trying to gently introduce the idea of regaining some autonomy. Paula, sitting in her favorite chair, knitting with a precision that reflected years of practice, looked up at Esther. Her penetrating and calculated gaze crossed the room before responding. "Dear, your concern is touching but completely unnecessary. You should focus only on adjusting to the new house, and I'm here to ensure that happens. Eduardo entrusted this task to me, and I will not fail him. Meanwhile, you can rest easy. I will take care of all the household chores," Paula replied, each word laden with a finality that left little room for argument. Esther felt frustration grow within her, a mix of anger and helplessness. "But Paula, don't you think it would be beneficial for me to familiarize myself if I felt more useful? Sitting around all day is not helping. I need to move, do something productive." Esther insisted, her voice trembling slightly, revealing the tension she struggled to control. Paula set her knitting in her lap, a gesture that preceded the seriousness of her words. Esther, you don't understand. The world out there is full of dangers, and this city isn't the safest to be wandering around alone. My responsibility is to protect you, not to expose you to unnecessary risks. And if something happened, how would I explain that to Eduardo? Paula questioned, using Esther's safety as an argument, a tactic aimed at strengthening her dominant position. The debate between the two women continued, with Esther trying to find flaws in Paula's armor, looking for a breach that would allow her to breathe, to be herself again. I understand your concern, Paula, and I appreciate it. But I need you to also understand that what I need now is movement, to be independent, to become the best woman for your son, through small acts of autonomy that you seem determined to deny me, Esther argued, her determination strengthening with every word despite the fear she felt. Paula sighed, a rare demonstration of patience that preceded her final decision. Esther, I'll think about your request, but for now things will remain as they are. It's late and you should rest. We can resume this conversation tomorrow, maybe, Paula proposed, ending the debate with a note of postponement that left Esther unsure if she had made any progress. That night, Esther lay in her bed, her mind bubbling with confused thoughts and emotions. Despite the apparent stalemate, she felt that something had changed, a slight shift in the power dynamics between her and Paula. It was a glimmer of hope, still small but persistent, encouraging her not to give up. I think maybe we can really understand each other. I just need to learn how to deal with her and be nice, and then we will get closer and become a beautiful family, she told herself before falling asleep. Waking up the next morning, Esther barely had time to process her thoughts before a strong wave of nausea pushed her out of bed, running towards the bathroom. The cold ceramic against her skin was a small consolation as she succumbed to the debilitating sensation, the sound echoing off the walls. In the bathroom, she vomited part of the food she had consumed the day before. Still panting, she washed her face, trying to erase not only the traces of the event that had just occurred, but also the vulnerability it represented. Upon leaving the bathroom, the aromas coming from the kitchen hit her with an almost tangible intensity, making her stomach churn once again. Breakfast will be ready soon, Esther, announced Paula, innocently unaware of her daughter-in-law's condition, or perhaps choosing to ignore it. Paula's voice, usually a presence that instilled fear and apprehension, now seemed distant, muffled by all the thoughts dominating Esther's mind. It was in this moment of vulnerability that the phone rang, the melody of the device cutting through the morning silence like a beacon of hope from the caller ID. Eduardo, Esther murmured to herself before answering, trying to compose her voice. Hi, love, how are you? Eduardo's voice on the other end was like a haven, bringing with it a sense of normalcy so desperately needed. Everything's great, she lied, forcing a tone of lightness that didn't reflect her true state. The conversation flowed briefly, with Esther painting an unreal picture of her routine, hiding the cracks that were starting to form in the relationship between her and Paula within the house, hoping to contain them. After hanging up, Esther found herself reflecting on how easily the lies had flowed from her lips. It was a protection, a shield against the worries she knew her true circumstances would bring to Eduardo. I can't let my fiancé know what's happening here. I'm responsible for making things work between me and my mother-in-law. She's not that bad, just needs to learn to cook better. I think I'll give her some tips. Entering the kitchen, determined not to let her morning start with defeat, Esther decided it was time to act, to reclaim some control over the entire situation in the friendliest way possible. Under one of the cameras Eduardo had installed in the house, Esther began. Paula, I'd like to help with the household chores, especially in the kitchen. I know you can do everything very well without me, but I believe we can exchange knowledge and grow closer through this, she announced, surprising herself with the kindness in her voice. Paula's reaction was a penetrating look, a silent evaluation that Esther chose to ignore. However, after a moment of reflection, Paula put her wooden spoon down on the counter, seeming to consider Esther's offer more seriously than expected. Interesting that you want this, Esther. The kitchen is indeed a place where a lot of our family culture is expressed. Perhaps there's something you can learn here from my skills. Paula finally conceded, though her expression still held a trace of reservation. Let's start with something simple. I don't want you to get overwhelmed. Esther approached, feeling a mix of victory and nervousness. I'm ready to learn. What are we making? She asked, watching Paula prepare the ingredients. Paula chose a basic breakfast recipe, scrambled eggs with bacon, something that would serve as a test for Esther's culinary skills, but also as an opportunity to observe how they would interact in this new context, despite disapproving of having a daughter-in-law who would soon marry and spend her life with her son. As they prepared the dish together, Paula began to guide Esther with surprising patience. See, the secret is in how you cut the meat. Each piece must be the same size to fry evenly. Esther followed the instructions, focused, discovering a new side of Paula that was neither authoritarian nor distant, but instructive and even kind. Or at least that's how it seemed at that moment. The joint activity in the kitchen led to spontaneous conversations about life, a natural exchange that had been absent between them for a long time. Esther listened attentively as Paula shared kitchen tips among stories of Eduardo's childhood, revealing layers of her personality that Esther had never seen. It was as if in that shared space a truce had been established, allowing both to lower their guards momentarily. When he was little, I remember Eduardo would play with the farm animals like they were his friends. He always treated them very well until we had to sacrifice them to make meals like this. It was a shame, and soon Eduardo would come back to my arms again, and I would console him, Paula recounted with an odd casualness. After finishing the dish, Paula invited Esther to taste the result of their joint effort. Try it. Let's see how you did. Esther tasted it, surprised by the delicious flavor they had created together. It's great, she admitted, a sincere smile crossing her face. Paula, on her side, allowed herself a brief smile of satisfaction. See, you can be a good cook with the right practice. Well done, Esther. After the unexpected and pleasant interaction that morning in the kitchen, Esther decided to take a long shower, allowing herself a moment of relaxation after the accumulated tensions of the previous days. As the hot water ran, easing her muscles and thoughts, Paula acted quietly in the kitchen, taking advantage of Esther's absence to prepare lunch on her own. She moved with an efficiency that only years of practice could offer, each gesture a testament to her familiarity with the space and tasks. When Esther finally appeared, refreshed from the shower, she found the table already set. Lunch served with an impeccable presentation that rivaled dishes from any high-class restaurant. Paula, you did all this while I was in the shower. I wanted to help. You could have waited for me, Esther expressed, a touch of disappointment in her voice for the missed opportunity to continue building on that morning's truce. Don't worry, dear. For this lunch, I wanted to take care of everything so you could rest and take your bath in peace. Besides, I've already eaten. I'll be in the garden and want you to eat well. I'll leave you alone here for a bit, Paula replied, with a smile that in Esther's eyes seemed to carry an unentirely kind meaning. During lunch, Esther tried to focus on the sensations of the moment, on the flavors that Paula had so professionally combined, but a restlessness grew within her, an uncomfortable reminder of the previous discomfort. And as if in a cruel reminder, it didn't take long after lunch, when Paula curiously wasn't around, for the same feeling of nausea to hit her forcefully, forcing her to run to the bathroom, despair coloring each step. Locked in the bathroom, Esther leaned over the cold sink, the reflection in the mirror showing a paleness that betrayed her malaise. The nausea that invaded her was stronger than last time, a whirlwind that seemed to suck away all her energy. It can't just be a coincidence, she thought, the sound of running water from the faucet sounding distant as she tried to wash her face in hopes of dispelling the feeling of weakness. The doubt about the cause of her discomfort consumed her, more and more certain that it wasn't a simple mistake in food preparation. Taking a deep breath, she tried to gather strength, knowing she needed to address the situation with Paula, even if every part of her being would rather just withdraw and forget the incident. Slowly recovering from the discomfort, Esther returned to the table, a shadow of concern crossing her face. Paula, I felt sick again, right after lunch. Esther began, hesitant, not wanting to accuse but unable to ignore the coincidence. Paula, in turn, furrowed her brow in a show of concern. Oh dear, that's worrisome. Do you think it was something you ate? Maybe the breakfast you prepared didn't sit well. It might not have been a good idea for us to cook together, Paula suggested, her voice distilling a veiled insinuation that struck Esther like a blow. This subtle accusation, shifting the blame to Esther, left her even more confused and full of apprehensions. But I barely ate this morning and everything was fine until now. It must have been something that happened after breakfast because bacon and eggs shouldn't have made me this sick, Esther responded, her mind working frantically to piece things together. Paola's insinuation not only hurt her but also planted a seed of doubt about her own actions and abilities. Could it be possible that she had caused her own discomfort? Realizing her genuinely debilitated condition, Paola approached with a still feigned expression of concern, offering to help Esther sit down. "Dear, maybe you just exerted yourself too much this morning in the kitchen. You're not used to it and it could have affected your stomach," Paola suggested, implying that Esther's initiative to cook might be the cause of her discomfort. Esther, amid waves of nausea, tried to process Paola's words, internally questioning whether her own actions had contributed to her state. Paola continued while preparing a suggestion that supposedly would help Esther feel better. "Look, I think it's best if I take care of the kitchen for now. We need to make sure you're eating something that won't make you sick." The offer, though it appeared caring, carried a tone that stripped Esther of any autonomy over her dietary choices, reinforcing Paola's position as the indispensable caretaker, whose actions should not be questioned. Esther, still struggling against the discomfort, had no strength to contest Paola's suggestion. The idea that her brief period in the kitchen could be the cause of her suffering seemed increasingly true in her weakened mind. The doubt about her own capabilities and the dependency on Paola's approval grew within her. However, amidst the discomfort, a spark of resistance ignited within Esther. She recognized the need to assert herself more within the house, not to let isolated incidents define her capabilities or limit her actions in that environment. "Paola, I appreciate your concern, but I think I also need to learn from my mistakes. If indeed it was something I did at breakfast, I want to understand what it was so I don't repeat it," Esther managed to say, her voice weak but determined, marking a small yet significant act of assertiveness. Paola, surprised by Esther's response, couldn't hide a brief puff of respect for her daughter-in-law. "Very well, Esther, if that's your decision, I'll respect it, but please take care of yourself. We wouldn't want Eduardo to worry unnecessarily on his important trip, would we?" Paola's response, while still maintaining her stance of superiority, indicated an opening for a more balanced dialogue, a convenient acknowledgement that Esther had the right to participate more actively in managing her own health and well-being. As dusk approached, Esther armed herself with determination to face the next challenge, preparing dinner on her own, an attempt to regain some control and autonomy over her life in that house. "Paola, I was thinking maybe I could prepare dinner tonight by myself. That would be really important to me," Esther said, finding Paola in the living room, who was leafing through an old family recipe book. Paola looked up, surprised by the suggestion. "Alone? Are you sure? Not that I doubt your abilities, but—" Paola left the sentence hanging, clearly hesitant to relinquish control of the kitchen to her daughter-in-law for some reason she insisted on hiding. "Yes, I'm sure. I think it will be good for me, plus I'd like to surprise you with a dish from my own family," Esther insisted, maintaining a calm and confident tone, trying to mask the anxiety she felt inside. After a moment of silence in which the ticking of the clock seemed to echo louder than usual, Paola finally nodded. "All right, Esther, the kitchen is yours. But if you need anything, I'll be around, and you can ask for my help whenever necessary, as it will be," she said, not without casting a look that mixed curiosity with a hint of doubt regarding Esther's abilities. Once in the kitchen, Esther began preparing dinner, each movement a mix of caution and excitement. Then, while searching for a specific ingredient in the cupboard, her hands found a jar labeled as rat poison. The jar was almost hidden behind some food cans, as if someone had tried to conceal it, but not well enough. For a moment her heart stopped, breath caught in her throat. With the jar still in her hands, Esther confronted Paola. "What is this doing here in the kitchen?" Her voice was firm, though it trembled slightly. Paola, caught off guard, took a second longer to respond. "Oh, it must have been placed there by mistake. You know, with the house being so large, sometimes things end up not being in the right place," Paola explained. But there was a lightness in her voice that wasn't convincing. "By mistake, Paola, this is rat poison. It shouldn't be anywhere near food. It could cause serious harm to someone if ingested by mistake," Esther retorted, suspicion and indignation growing within her. Paola just shrugged, a failed attempt to appear uninterested. Well, now that you found it, you can put it in the right place. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll get back to my book." Esther stood still for a moment, processing the exchange. The discovery not only made her uncomfortable, but also gave new life to her previous suspicions about Paula's intentions. However, instead of confronting Paula directly, Esther chose a different approach. "I'll put this in a safe place. Maybe she's right and I'm just being a bit paranoid. I'll get back to cooking," she thought to herself. As Esther focused on preparing dinner, she decided she needed a quick break. "Just a minute," she murmured to herself, heading to the bathroom. The kitchen, now immersed in the inviting aromas of the dishes she was preparing, was a testament to her effort to create a special night, despite the challenging circumstances. After a brief moment in the bathroom, Esther returned to the kitchen, expecting to find everything as she had left it. However, the scene before her eyes ignited a spark of anger she didn't know she possessed. Paula, with her back to the entrance, was just adding a jar of some supposed seasoning to the pot in which Esther was preparing dinner. "What do you think you're doing?" Esther's voice sounded louder and firmer than she intended, echoing off the kitchen walls. Paula startled at Esther's voice, turning abruptly, the jar still in her hand. Surprise and fear were evident on her face, a mask of emotions she struggled to control. "Esther, I just wanted to help. I thought the dish needed a bit more flavor," she stammered, her justification sounding weak even to her own ears. "Help? Helping by putting something in my food without asking? That's not help, it's intrusion. That must be why I've been feeling sick lately, not even knowing what I'm ingesting." Esther exploded, frustration and anger bubbling to the surface. Her hands trembled, not just from anger, but from the betrayal that action represented. Paula took a step back, clearly frightened by the intensity of Esther's reaction. "Please don't think ill of me. It was a mistake, I admit. It won't happen again, you can be assured, my dear daughter-in-law." She tried to apologize, but her words seemed inadequate given the circumstances. "A mistake? You call this a mistake? I was looking forward to making this dinner, to prove to myself and to you that I can... And you ruin everything with a mistake." Esther continued, her voice laden with emotion and disappointment. It was more than just the act itself, it was what that act represented about trust and personal space. Paula, now visibly shaken, lowered her gaze. "I'm truly sorry, Esther, I wasn't thinking. Please give me a chance to make it right," she pleaded, offering the jar of seasoning as if it were a white flag. Esther looked at the jar, then at Paula, her chest rising and falling rapidly with each heavy breath. For a moment, the silence between them was palpable, charged with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. "I need some time to think. Please leave me alone," Esther finally said, her voice calmer but still quivering with traces of anger. Paula nodded silently, placing the seasoning jar on the counter before leaving the kitchen, leaving Esther alone with her tumultuous thoughts. As the door closed behind Paula, Esther leaned on the counter, trying to process the avalanche of emotions the confrontation had triggered. Dinner, which was supposed to be a moment of celebration and pride, had turned into an emotional battlefield, leaving Esther questioning not just Paula's intentions, but also how they could move forward from this point. With the house now quiet, Esther turned her attention to the seasoning jar Paula had used, driven by a disturbing curiosity. Opening the jar, she expected to find just common spices, but what she saw made her freeze. Inside, mixed with the spices, were grains she didn't recognize, something definitely out of place. Her heart raced as she realized this could be the cause of her recent discomfort. "Wait, this looks a lot like that rat poison I found in the kitchen, but could it be... It's not possible, my mother-in-law wouldn't try to poison me." At the peak of that night, after the incident in the kitchen, Esther felt the situation had reached an unsustainable point. She sought out Paula in the living room, determined to resolve things once and for all. "Paula, we need to talk, and it needs to be serious," Esther began, her voice firm, though her heart raced. Paula looked at Esther, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it, Esther? I'm listening," she responded, trying to maintain an appearance of calm. "What happened today in the kitchen? That was the last straw. I can't and won't tolerate this kind of behavior anymore. You crossed all the boundaries. You gave poison to your own daughter-in-law in her food," Esther declared, staring directly into Paula's eyes. Paula seemed surprised, perhaps not expecting such a direct confrontation. Esther, I've already apologized for the seasoning and you heard me. It was a misidentification on my part. You don't need to make all this drama just because of that, she tried to explain, but Esther interrupted. Apologies are not enough, Paula. It's not just about a specific seasoning or about who cooks dinner. It's about respect, trust, and privacy, and unfortunately, you've shown you respect none of those. You played with someone's life, and it's someone your son loves, Paula. Esther continued, each word heavy with the frustration and disappointment accumulated. There was a moment of silence between them, a heavy silence that filled the space with tension and expectation. Paula finally spoke, her voice low. So what are you suggesting? I think you better be clear and just say it. I think it's best for everyone if you move out, at least for now. We need space and time to evaluate all that's happening here, Esther said, her decision clear in her voice, even if her heart ached at the idea of sending someone away from their home. Paula looked at Esther, her eyes full of a mix of feigned sadness and understanding. If that's what you think is necessary, I'll respect your decision. I didn't want it to come to this, but I see that my actions have consequences, even though those actions were very simple and justifiable in my view, she responded, finally acknowledging the gravity of the situation, or a portion of it. Esther felt a bitter relief hearing those words. Thank you for understanding, Paula. I hope that in time you can realize you can't simply poison your son's girlfriend so he won't get engaged and married, Esther expressed, harboring a small hope for future reconciliation. As Paula began to pack her things, Esther reflected on the tough decision she had just made. Sending Paula away from home was not something done lightly, but it was a necessary step to protect her peace and start rebuilding her life on new terms. Moreover, she was taking care of herself, as Paula had attempted to poison her with rat poison. I shouldn't have to do this to Paula, but she really crossed very high limits, and I can't allow that here. I won't bother Eduardo with this matter now, but I want her gone. Esther reflected in her own company. A few hours after Paula's departure, Esther's phone rang in an unexpectedly calm moment, with Eduardo's name appearing on the screen. With a heavy heart, she answered, anticipating the storm she was about to face. Esther, please tell me it's not true. My mother just called me, completely devastated. She said she was kicked out of the house. What happened? Eduardo's voice was filled with confusion and concern, indicating he was struggling to understand the situation presented by his mother. After a moment of silence from Esther, Eduardo continued, Esther, we need to talk about this now. I'm trying to understand your point of view, but it's difficult without knowing all the details. My mother is saying one thing, and I feel like you have another version. What exactly happened? Eduardo pressed, his voice revealing a mix of frustration and a desire to understand what was happening in his absence. She sighed deeply, knowing the conversation would not be easy. Eduardo, believe me when I say this was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I never wanted things to reach this point, but after everything that happened, I felt I had no choice, Esther explained, her voice trembling with emotion. But to kick out my mother, Esther, do you realize how serious that is? I'm on the other side of the world feeling helpless because I don't know what's happening in my own home. Eduardo's voice rose in volume, not out of anger, but due to the anguish of feeling disconnected from the situation. Esther, I need you to be honest with me. What did my mother do to make you take such drastic action? You know we can talk about anything. Why didn't you wait for me to come back so we could discuss this together? Eduardo's concern was evident, seeking to understand but also to be part of the solution. I know, Eduardo, and I'm sorry for that, but it wasn't something that could wait. Your mother, she crossed lines that shouldn't have been crossed. It's not just a simple situation that can be solved with a conversation. It's more complicated, Esther responded, choosing her words carefully not to exacerbate the situation, but also to defend her decision until she could explain it in person. Eduardo sighed on the other end, a sound of understanding mixed with the promise of support. All right, Esther, I'll try to book a flight to come back as soon as possible, right after we finish the last meeting of the week. We need to sort this out together, face to face. I trust you, and I know you wouldn't do something like this without a very strong reason. We'll talk more when I arrive. They ended the call with promises to seek a resolution together, leaving Esther with her thoughts. She knew the conversation with Eduardo would be one of the most challenging moments of her life, but she was determined to explain her reasons, hoping to find a way to move forward together. He will understand, he has to. I really tried to befriend her, but it didn't work. I thought I was the mistake, but she was trying to get me out of her son's life. Esther reflected. 2 days after the call, Eduardo finally arrived home after a long and exhausting flight. The tension from the previous conversation with Esther still weighing on his mind. Upon seeing her, the seriousness in his gaze indicated he was ready to uncover the truth behind the conflicting claims. Esther, we need to clarify what happened while I was away. You mentioned things got complicated with my mother, but I need to see for myself to understand, Eduardo began, striving to maintain a calm approach despite the anxiety he felt. Esther, recognizing Eduardo's determination, agreed, albeit reluctantly. I understand, Eduardo. I know all this seems confusing, and you have every right to want to uncover the truth, she replied, her voice low but firm. But before, I'd like you to know that every decision I made was with the best interest for both of us in mind, even if it seems otherwise now. Eduardo then turned to the security system he had installed in the house, a precautionary measure he never imagined he'd need to use to clarify a domestic conflict. I'll check the cameras. If there's something I need to know, it's better to find out sooner, he said, a heavy heart as he typed the access password to the recording archive. As the images began to display on the computer screen, both remained silent, Esther closely watching Eduardo's reaction. The recordings showed trivial day-to-day moments, until Eduardo paused on a specific scene, his expression turning from confusion to alarm. What? This can't be true, he murmured, disbelief coloring his voice. In the camera image, Eduardo's mother was seen adding rat poison to the food she was preparing, then handing it over to Esther after adding many spices to slightly mask the taste. Esther, by his side, felt a whirlwind of emotions. Eduardo, what you saw, I can explain, she began, interrupted by Eduardo, who raised his hand asking for immediate silence, in light of everything he was seeing through the security camera recordings. My mother was trying to... Esther, this changes everything. How could this have really happened here? How and why? Eduardo finally said, after a moment of deep reflection. The recording didn't show Esther committing an act of betrayal, but rather a completely different situation that defied the accusations previously made. Esther took the opportunity to express herself. Eduardo, from the beginning, all I wanted was to protect our home, our life together. There was a misunderstanding, a mistaken perception of my actions, she explained, her words laden with sincerity. Eduardo, now with a clearer understanding of the situation, looked at Esther, a glimpse of relief in his eyes. Esther, I believe you. We'll sort this out together, clear up the misunderstandings and ensure nothing shakes our trust again, not even my mother. We should confront her for the sake of our freedom. I'm going to call my mother right now, he proposed, grabbing his phone to dial the number. Paula answered, the initial silence broken by her hesitant breathing on the other end of the line. Mom, we need to talk about what happened. I can't understand why you did this, Eduardo said, his voice trembling, mixing frustration with the search for answers. There was a pause, a deep sigh before his mother began to speak, her voice laden with raw emotion. Eduardo, my son, I was just trying to protect our bond. I saw how close you were getting to Esther, and the fear of losing you to her consumed me. I didn't want someone to steal you from me. We've always been so close, she confessed, her words sounding more like a lament than a justification. With a heavy feeling and without finding words that could express his disappointment and pain, Eduardo abruptly hung up the phone, letting the silence speak for itself. A day later, in the quiet of their own home, Eduardo faced one of the hardest decisions of his life. After checking the security cameras again, an unexpected and painful truth emerged within him, forcing him to face a reality he had never imagined. The evidence before his eyes was undeniable, a silent testimony to acts that went beyond the bounds of trust and familial love. With a heavy heart, Eduardo knew what he had to do, but the decision to report his own mother to the police came with deep pain, a sense of betrayal to bonds he believed were unbreakable. How did we get to this point, Mum? He wondered, his internal voice echoing in the solitude of his thoughts. Standing up, Eduardo walked to the phone, each step heavy with the gravity of his decision. Dialing the police number felt surreal, a line that once crossed would change everything forever. This is for the greater good, something bigger than jealousy or a lack of compassion for others, he murmured to himself, trying to find some consolation in his rationale, even knowing the consequences of his action would extend for a long time. As he reported the situation to the authorities, Eduardo's voice trembled, not just from nervousness but also from the emotion of revealing such a personal truth to strangers. My mother was putting rat poison in my fiancé's food with the intention of getting her out of the way at all costs. I want you to do something about this. After the call, Eduardo sat down, enveloped in profound silence. The decision was made. There was no turning back. He knew he would face difficult days ahead, dealing with the repercussions of his actions not only within his family but also in his own sense of justice and loyalty. How could my own mother dare to do this to my fiancé? It's really shocking. Time passed, bringing significant changes to Eduardo and Esther's lives. They finally celebrated their wedding, an event symbolizing not just the union of their lives, but also the overcoming of the adversities they faced together. The wedding was an intimate ceremony with only a few family members present, filled with hope and forward-looking glances, marking a new chapter in their lives, one where love and mutual understanding were the foundations on which they intended to build their future. Paola, on the other hand, found herself on a more solitary path. Her time in prison was a period of intense personal reflection. Facing the consequences of her actions, Paola dedicated herself to understanding the mistakes she made and seeking ways to redeem herself. Although the days were long and often marked by loneliness, she clung to the hope of one day rebuilding the ties that had been damaged by her decisions. Eduardo and Esther, though deeply affected by past events, chose not to let the shadows of those times dictate the course of their lives. They supported each other, finding strength in shared vulnerability and a renewed commitment to protect and nurture the love they shared. You've reached the end of another gripping narrative on our channel. We invite you to subscribe and leave your like on our video, as it helps us grow and continue publishing new stories almost daily. See you in the next amazing tale.
My name is Linda Johnson. I woke up to the familiar sound of my alarm clock. The gentle chimes echoed through the cozy bedroom of our home in the suburbs of Springfield, Ohio. The soft morning light filtering through the floral curtains cast a warm glow on the faded wallpaper that had witnessed countless family memories over the years. I'm 55 years old, working part-time as a teacher while managing household chores. As I get out of bed and slip on my well-worn slippers, I think about the busy day ahead while going through my morning routine. On my way to the kitchen, I pause in front of my 14-year-old son Michael's room. I gently open the door to check on him, still sleeping. I'm secretly proud of the wonderful relationship we've built. He's hardly gone through the typical teenage rebellion and never causes trouble at school. While preparing breakfast, I think about my husband, Robert. He's 58 and currently away on a long business trip. Apparently, he's been assigned a big project, which has kept him away from home more often. We have fewer chances to talk on the phone, and I sometimes feel a bit lonely. But I remind myself that it's all for work. As the pleasant aroma of toasting bread fills the kitchen, I glance at the calendar. Noticing that Robert's expected return date is still far off, I let out a small sigh. I'm a little concerned that we're spending less time together as a family of 3. Michael appears in the kitchen with a sleepy face. "Good morning, Mom," he says as he sits at the table. As usual, we have breakfast together, chatting about school events and his friends. I deeply appreciate how precious these ordinary moments are. After breakfast, I see Michael off to school and start preparing for my own work. My part-time teaching job is rewarding, though sometimes challenging. But I'm determined to do my best for my family. Before leaving the house, I look at the family photo in the living room. The 3 of us smiling. But I realize we haven't taken a new picture in a while. Perhaps we've been spending less family time since Robert's work got busier. Feeling this slight unease, I leave the house without dwelling on it further. While driving, I think about today's lessons. Picturing my students' faces makes me a bit nervous. But my love for teaching helps ease that tension. Arriving at school, I exchange greetings with my colleagues. Everyone's kind, and it's a pleasant work environment. Yet, when I think about home, an indescribable anxiety flickers in my chest. Still, I need to focus on the task at hand. Taking a deep breath, I head to the classroom, feeling as if an unknown fate awaits me. After finishing the afternoon classes, I head home. It was another day encouraged by my students' smiles. While driving, I ponder dinner options. Should I make Michael's favorite lasagna, or go for a simple chicken salad? Lost in such ordinary thoughts, I park the car in our garage. I open the front door and call out, "I'm home." Naturally, there's no response. Michael should still be at school. As I put down my bag and start towards the kitchen, I hear footsteps rushing down the stairs. Michael. I turn around in surprise to see my son standing before me. It's too early for him to be back from school. Mom. There's an urgency in Michael's voice that I've never heard before. His face is pale, and sweat beads on his forehead. What's wrong? What about school? Michael interrupts my questions with a shout. We need to run away right now. My heart leaps at those words. What? What happened? Michael, out of breath, tries to explain quickly. It's about Dad. Dad. His words trail off. I place my hands on my son's shoulders, trying to calm him. It's okay, take your time. What happened? Michael takes a deep breath, seeming to calm down a bit. But fear still lingers in his eyes. Dad, we're in danger. I don't know the details, but I saw Dad's phone. Alarms go off in my head. Robert's phone. Danger. What's going on? Michael, calm down. What did you see on Dad's phone? My son hesitates, then pulls a smartphone from his pocket. Dad left this at home. And then, there were strange messages. I take the smartphone from Michael and look at the screen. Indeed, there are conversations with people we don't know. As I read the content, my hands start to shake. This is... I'm at a loss for words. The content is unbelievable. Michael continues, Mom, it looks like Dad's involved in something bad. And we might be in danger too. I look into my son's face. His eyes reflect anxiety and fear, but also a strong determination. I understand. I take a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. First, let's calm down and you tell me everything in detail. We move to the living room and sit on the sofa. Michael clasps his hands on his knees and begins to tell me everything. The content of the messages he found on the phone, unsettling rumors he heard at school, and the recent changes in Robert's behavior. As I listen, various emotions swirl within me. Surprise, fear, and sadness. An unknown side of my husband of many years is being revealed. At the same time, I feel a strong need to handle this situation calmly. Michael, thank you for telling me all this. I hold my son's hand and smile encouragingly. You're very brave. Michael seems a little relieved, but tension still hasn't left him. Mom, what should we do? I think deeply. I need to make a calm judgment now. The safety of our family is the top priority. Well, I choose my words carefully. First, it might be dangerous to stay here. But it's not good to move hastily either. I stand up and look out the window. The view of the quiet residential area remains unchanged. However, I can't help but sense the danger lurking within this tranquility. Michael, let's pack our bags. Just the essentials. I make my decision. And I'll contact my friend Sarah. We can trust her. My son nods silently. His eyes reflect anxiety but also trust in me. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this together. I say firmly. However, anxiety swirls in my heart. What will become of us now? And Robert, what on earth are you doing? Michael and I started packing our essentials hurriedly. All the while, I couldn't get the content of my son's story out of my head. Hey, Michael, I asked carefully, choosing my words. Can you tell me more about the messages you saw on Dad's phone? Michael stopped packing and took a deep breath. Yes. He began hesitantly. It looked like Dad was making some kind of deal with someone. There was talk about money and documents. My heart raced. A deal? What kind of deal? I'm not sure, but... Michael furrowed his brow. It seemed like he was trying to sell confidential company information. I gasped at those words. Robert, doing such a thing. It's unbelievable. But thinking back on his recent behavior, something had definitely been off. Anything else that bothered you? I asked, trying to maintain my composure. Michael thought for a moment before answering. Dad's been talking on the phone a lot lately in a hushed voice. He'd hang up in a hurry when I got close. Come to think of it, I had noticed that too. But I had convinced myself it was just work secrets. Now, it all makes sense. The increase in long business trips, less time with family, and the occasional uneasy demeanor he showed. Mom, has Dad turned into a bad person? Michael's voice trembled. I hugged my son. No, that's not it. There must be some circumstances we don't know about. But right now, our safety is the most important thing. As we continued packing, I looked around the house. Is there any clue? My eyes fell on the bookshelf in the study. Wait a minute, I went to the bookshelf and pulled out an old album. As I flipped through the pages, photos of our happy times were lined up. But there were no recent photos. Then, a piece of paper slipped out from the back of the album. This is... I exclaimed in surprise. It was a bank statement. There were records of huge transactions I knew nothing about. "Michael, come here," I called my son. "Look at this." It seems Dad was hiding something big from us. Michael's eyes widened as he looked at the statement. "Mom, does this mean?" I exhaled deeply. "Yes. The situation seems to be more serious than we thought." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Michael and I looked at each other, frozen. "Who is it?" Michael asked in a low voice. "I don't know," I answered cautiously. "But maybe." The doorbell rang again. We held our breath. "Mom, what should we do?" Michael's voice was shaking. I made a decision. "We don't have time. Let's leave right now." Through the back door. We hurriedly finished packing the rest of our belongings and headed for the back door. As we did, I took one last look at our family photos. Memories of happier days. But now, we must face a new reality. "Are you ready?" I asked Michael. He nodded bravely. "Yes, let's go." We quietly opened the back door and stepped outside. We don't know where we're heading yet. But we have each other. That's enough. "I'll call Sarah," I said. "She should be able to help us." Michael nodded silently. His eyes reflected anxiety but also strong determination. We quickly got into the car. As I started the engine, I looked back at the house one more time. The memories we built there, and the peaceful days now lost. But we must look forward. "It's going to be okay," I told Michael. "We'll get through this together." As I drove away, a sense of determination grew in my heart. This is the beginning of a new life. And the start of a journey to uncover the truth. After hanging up the phone with Sarah, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heart. My friend was surprised but immediately offered to help. Now we have a temporary shelter secured. "Michael, we're going to Sarah's place. Let's hurry with the preparations." My son nodded silently and continued packing. Watching him, I once again realized the gravity of our situation. The ordinary life we had just hours ago now seemed like a distant past. Suddenly, we heard the sound of a car. We froze. "Mom, could it be?" Michael's voice trembled. The car visible through the window was unmistakably Robert's. "Hurry," I said in a low voice. "Leave the luggage. We need to get out through the back door right now." Being careful not to make any noise, we headed for the back door. Just before opening it, we heard the front door open. "Linda." "Michael." Robert's voice echoed through the house. Michael and I looked at each other. Seeing the fear in my son's eyes, I steeled my resolve. "Let's go." I took Michael's hand and we went out through the back door. We crossed the yard and came out to the back alley. Robert's voice was getting closer. "Linda. Where are you?" My heart was pounding. But we couldn't stop. We came out to the main street and hailed a taxi. "Hurry," I told the driver as we got in. Take us as far as you can. Just as the car started moving, I saw Robert burst out of the alley. Linda! Wait! His voice gradually faded away. Michael looked back, but I kept facing forward. It's okay, I said with a shaky voice. We have our own path now. The taxi drove out of town and continued through unfamiliar scenery. Looking at the landscape flowing past the window, I reflected on my life so far. Our wedding day. The day Michael was born. The happy times we spent as a family. And the shocking truth revealed today. Everything was running through my mind like a fast-moving picture show. Mom, Michael's voice brought me back to reality. What's going to happen to us now? I squeezed my son's hand. I don't know. But if we're together, I'm sure we can overcome anything. The taxi entered the highway. The lights of the town behind us gradually grew smaller. It seemed to symbolize our farewell to our past. It's the beginning of a new life, I whispered. Michael nodded silently. In his eyes, I could see anxiety but also a glimmer of hope. The taxi continued driving through the darkness of the night. We don't know our destination. But what's certain is that we're here together. And we have a strong determination to protect each other. Hey, Michael, I said quietly. We'll understand about Dad someday. But for now, let's think about our future. Yes, Michael's voice had regained some strength. Looking at the scenery flowing past the window, I exhaled deeply. This is the path we've chosen. It might be difficult. But I'm proud that we had the courage to seek the truth and start a new life. The taxi's headlights cut through the darkness, carrying us towards an unknown future. We don't know what awaits us. But surely, a path will open up. As long as Michael and I walk together, supporting each other. Well, this is the beginning of our new life, I whispered, softly